Just going to wait one more minute and then we'll get started.
I like your picture, Allison. It's on this like cold winter day. That just looks so nice.
I love these pictures. It just, I'd like to be in that boat, just floating around
Yeah,
that pond,
yeah. On March 4th, amen.
right? Except we still have feet of snow
Yeah.
everywhere. All right. I think we're just about what, 12:01? Looks like the
Yeah.
number of participants is increasing, but I do want to get started because we have a lot to cover today. So thank you all for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about building an AI roadmap in a rapidly evolving legal landscape. Say that three times fast. Um, I'm really excited to be joined today by Mike Clarkson from
Hi,
Ogletree
everybody.
Deakins. And I'm going to let him introduce himself and talk a little bit about Ogletree in just a minute. I'm Allyson Hay. I am the VP of Human Resource Services here at Innovo. As many of you may know, Innovo Benefits Group is a um, brokerage services organization. We offer benefits brokerage, but we also have two additional services we provide. We provide HR consulting and benefits administration services. We pride ourselves on being the largest independently owned benefits management firm in the greater Boston area. And we provide white glove services, a small boutique agency. There are links here. You'll be getting this presentation. Feel free to follow those links for more information. Also, I encourage everyone to Google search reviews for Innovo. Our clients say best what we do for our services we provide. And then I'll let Mike do a quick introduction and talk about a little about Ogletree Deakins.
Great. Thanks, Allison. And I speak very highly of Innovo. Allison and Eric Golko and I go way back, and I send my clients to them all the time. Just they do fantastic work. So Ogletree is a labor and employment law firm. We're management side, so we only represent employers. And although labor and employment is niche, I suppose it is plenty broad with some of the things that are on the screen, but also benefits, wage and hour, litigation, etc. I am a defense side litigator, but also I do a lot of workplace investigations and try to stay abreast of all the changes in this area, which is hard, but AI being one of them. So I think of Labor and Employment Council a bit like a plumber. You don't want to call me every day, but when something goes wrong, you want to make sure your plumber is good and responsive, and I hope to be both of those. So really happy to have the chance to talk to you all today about kind of a fun topic. So thanks for inviting me, Allison, and look forward to doing this.
Yeah, and right back at you. We love working with Mike Clarkson and Ogletree Deakins. They have vast knowledge and across all the different states. And Mike has always been a resource for us. So we're very lucky to have him today and also as a resource long term.
Thanks.
So let's talk a little bit about housekeeping. So we have a couple polls that we'll be doing throughout the presentation today. If you would like to submit some questions, use that Q&A feature to ask those. And we will be sending this presentation afterwards. And at the very end of the presentation, we'll also have those credit numbers for SHRM and HRCI credits. Our agenda today, we have a full agenda. So we're going to talk about how AI is used in the HR space, the federal laws that are specific to AI, as well as state laws in Texas and Colorado, some best practices, and we hope to leave some time for Q&A at the very end. So our first poll question today, in what areas are you currently using AI? So just go ahead and check off any that are applicable. I know Taryn is waiting for the most of the people to have completed the poll. All right.
Look at
Wow.
that.
I actually am really surprised by the 67% not using AI. But otherwise, we have it a little everywhere. So
Yeah,
this will be great. This will be a great discussion then. So I'm going to hand it over to Mike to start talking about, okay, why is it not? It's going forward. There we go. Um, AI practices in the various different areas of HR.
great. Well, thanks. And I too was struck by I literally said the cat would come down when we started talking. I hear it coming down. So if you see my cat, you can laugh along with me. She has this weird knowledge of that. She can be asleep on the couch and know when I'm presenting. So we're about to be visited. Anyway, I'll touch on some of the areas where AI is used. I'm not going to read from my slides, but in one area that it is used is recruiting, interviewing, and hiring. But philosophically, today and generally, I won't be a wet blanket for AI. There are risks, and I will talk about them. But I think if we overemphasize the risks, you'll never get off the couch to begin using this. And I was at a presentation on AI, and I was really struck by this one comment that was made, and I've stolen it for every AI presentation I've done since, which is you won't lose your job to AI. You will lose your job to somebody who knows AI better than you do. And I thought, oh, wow, right? I think that's really telling. The tool is too powerful, I think, to be ignored. The ship has left the dock, whatever metaphor you want to use. But um, don't let the concerns, which are real, keep you on the sidelines. I think that would be a mistake. So, here are some of the ways that AI is used in recruiting, interviewing, and or hiring. Um, some of these have some risks, and I'll talk about them. But again, don't let that paralyze you, right? The risks are that AI can have baked in or built in bias. You've probably heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out, right? There have been instances where people have demonstrated the bias of these, whether that was an implicit or inherent bias of the programmers or the system. You know, when you pour data into a system and ask it to make decisions, you better make sure you pour in unbiased data. Whatever the reason, know that there is the risk of inherent bias. And if you talk about, candidate selection or interview judging or the like, that could be a risk. Know too, though, that those kinds of claims are rare. They were rare before AI, and they are rare now. So again, don't let it paralyze you, but do be sensitive to the issue that AI is not perfect and it can have built-in or baked-in biases, and consider auditing them. Next slide, if you would, Allison, please. AI in performance management. These are areas that the tool is used now too. Take a second to look at these. It can be very valuable in this stuff. Give you a sense of it. Ogletree is using this for its own. We have what, 1,100 lawyers across all 50 states and many countries, managing their development and growth, making sure they hit milestones, are given the opportunity to handle and argue big motions in court, um, take depositions, write, key documents and the like. Hitting those milestones in the performance management, this tool can be very valuable, and we have them. That doesn't mean they operate entirely in a vacuum. We, of course, have human mentoring, office managing shareholders and the like, but we're all using these tools, and you can and probably should also. Um, Next one, productivity monitoring, right? I won't repeat the earlier points, but here is a caution. Think about that first one for a second. Automated time tracking, right? If any of you have been the unfortunate victim of a wage and hour case, right, which probably occupies no less than 20% of Ogletree's lawyers and revenue, right? It's a massive part of what we do. And here in Massachusetts, we have some very aggressive, very competent lawyers on the other side of the fence from me who bring these claims and nothing but these claims all the time. Automated time tracking would be one area to really pay attention, right? Automated time punches. Oh, Allison takes a 20-minute lunch every day, and we're going to automatically punch her out for that lunch and not pay her. Well, wait a second. Today she's not taking lunch. Today she's given a presentation, but she just had her time docked 20 minutes when she was actually working. So do beware of automated time tracking in this AI area. Certainly make sure that you have some safeguards around that. Wage and hour just carries too many penalties, I think, to let that one operate strictly in the background. Um, this next one, uh, you may, if you'll roll up one slide, the next one I think is really funny. Imagine this, okay? So AI is great at chatbots, or AI is filled with chatbots. Great is maybe the wrong word. Look at this chatbot example, right? I think my supervisor is harassing me. Thank you for contacting us. Please, we'd like to ask you some questions. What is the name of the supervisor, right? I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong about that answer, but the idea that a chatbot could address supervisory harassment is sort of absurd. And the chatbot ought to know enough to kick out questions of harassment, discrimination, retaliation, and the like for a human to handle. Um, it may be a good start, maybe, but it's certainly not the finish. So do be really careful about these. Uh, Even if I use a non-AI example, one, ripped from the headlines, right? Like Law and Order says, I had a case years ago where there was an employee survey, right? And it was, rate 1 to 5, your motivation, et cetera, all sort of vanilla stuff. But then there were some open response questions. And in one of the open response answers, a person wrote, I'm being harassed by Joseph, blah, blah, blah. Well, Joseph was the defendant in my case, and no one had ever reviewed the open response questions. And a year prior, people had identified him as a harasser, but it had never been investigated or dealt with, right? Oops, that was not a helpful fact in my case when we claimed, oh, we were ignorant that Joseph was doing this. We have robust training programs. Well, you couldn't have been that ignorant because you weren't looking at it. This kind of chatbot example on the screen now would be an error too. So make sure there is human interaction, or AI is limited to maybe some of the simpler ones, particularly if you're one of the 12 folks who hasn't yet dipped their toe in this water. Start small. I probably wouldn't start with a chatbot. All right. Trends and challenges. The trajectory of AI development is changing under the new administration. The Trump administration is largely pro AI, and that is important to understand. The pendulum, of course, as we all know, is swinging wildly left and right these days, and the next administration may not be pro AI, but the Trump administration is. And this is important to understand as you dip your toe in and figure out the scope of what AI you will use. So, what's this next line mean? Federal agency AI momentum may be impacted by the elimination of the Chevron doctrine. That's very lawyerly. But the Supreme Court has recently said that they will no longer give deference to administrative agencies like the EEOC, the Department of Labor, the Department of Justice, etc. These agencies, as you all know, regulate our work as employment lawyers and HR professionals greatly, right? The EEOC interprets what Title VII of the Civil Rights Act means, but the Supreme Court says that's not constitutional to give an executive branch agency, the EEOC, the authority to, in essence, render legislation. They found that a separation of powers problem. So, what does that mean? That means that the agencies, EEOC, to pick one, that might say, hold on, your AI is working a discriminatory bias against women or older workers or disabled workers, right? Those agencies have far less power than they did a year ago with the Supreme Court's decision. And with the Trump administration full throttle behind AI, some of those red lights, yellow lights have been turned off. Okay. So this should perhaps give you some more confidence to use these tools. They're too powerful to ignore, and you know the risk that you will be claimed to be fostering bias or discrimination is less than it was before that Supreme Court decision. And as it says here, states are likely to fill in the gaps. We will talk about Texas and Colorado, which is an interesting couple of states if you think about it, right? Those are not the states that we usually think of as driving the conversation in any area. But as maybe lots of things these days, the old order is gone, and we've now got some state regulation, which gives us a bit of a roadmap. But before we get there, next slide, if you would, there's a federal AI action plan from July of last year. So this isn't even a year old now. States with burdensome AI rules will not receive AI related federal funding. The Department of Labor and other agencies must prioritize AI skill development. There are tax benefits for AI training, etc. So there is a federal pro AI push going on now with the Trump administration. Next slide. Now, much of the Trump administration in the employment law space, as you all know, is an attack on DEI. That is a big part of what the current EEOC is all about and what the Trump administration is all about. And this executive order, which is on your slide, on your screen now, and it's in the next slide too, is an example of how they are saying that AI cannot be used to foster what they call illegal DEI. Okay, so there's a sort of an anti-DEI philosophy baked into this executive order, right? And you'll see right here on the screen. In the AI context, DEI includes the suppression or distortion of factual information about race or sex. So this executive order is trying to make sure that DEI doesn't creep into AI. Um, Now, I haven't seen this executed in an AI context yet. I haven't seen this executive order play out in real life, IRL, as our teenagers in our lives would say, right? But I have seen the DEI attack playing out in real life, and I do expect this executive order to play a similar role. Okay, so if your AI, policy is intended to foster a DEI concept from a couple of years ago, you might want to give that some thought. All right. Move up two if you would, because there we go. All right. So the EEOC has an AI technical assistance guidance. Now, note the date on this slide, May 2022, pre-Trump administration, and pre the destruction of the Chevron doctrine by the Supreme Court. So query how relevant a Biden administration AI technical assistance guidance is, right? The Supreme Court would say the EEOC has no constitutional authority to be issuing this kind of thing. But the concepts, I think, are still important. Um, this says that AI, what is referred to here as ADT, automated decision making tools, I think you can call that um, synonymous with AI, should not be used to screen out or give lower scores or assessments to people in protected classes, particularly disabled folks. Okay. And you probably know, I know we have at least one hospitality client here attending this. You probably know that the ADA not only covers workplace accommodation. I have a disability and I need you to provide me with reasonable accommodation. It also has ADA Title III, which is for curb cuts for wheelchairs, wide aisles in supermarkets for disabled people, hearing and visually impaired websites, and the like. I think you could consider this EEOC technical assistance guidance as trying to address things like that, to make sure that AI doesn't work a disadvantage to disabled people, whether it had that intention or not. Okay, so um, look at this second bullet, right? To have a legitimate ADT or AI process, you should be able to explain your metrics, how they're measured, and whether disability may lower an assessment. What does that really mean? I think what that means for us is you should be auditing these tools. And whether this technical assistance guidance is valid or not in today's Trump administration, I think is irrelevant. I think if you're using these tools, you should have a robust audit process to make sure that they're fair, to make sure, even leaving aside your litigation exposure to disabled workers or anyone else in a protected class, you want to make sure this tool actually works and doesn't have blind spots. So do put a human eye on it and audit it, if for no other reason than it may protect you from a claim. Um, Here's another technical assistance guidance, again, pre-Trump administration or pre-Trump 2. Um, you should, and this talks about self-auditing. Look at that last bullet there. Employers must self-audit ADT, or call it AI, on an ongoing basis. That's true. Okay. This also reflects, um, you see the first bullet, employers should assess whether an ADT has an adverse impact on a protected group. Sometimes that's called disparate impact, right? You probably are familiar with this concept that an otherwise legitimate criteria may work a disparate impact on people, their race, their age, their gender, their sexual orientation, whatever it is. That's not allowed, even if there isn't an underlying discriminatory bias, right? You can't just put up the classic example would be um, a requirement that, laborers have a college degree, and that is used to screen out, minority employees. Not okay if you don't need that college degree for a laborer position. Well, do know that in 2026, disparate impact claims are disfavored. They may even be going away. The Trump administration is certainly attacking them. They won't be brought by the EEOC, I can promise you that. But, private litigants may still bring them. And frankly, I think that it is the right thing to do to be auditing this, whether it's from a litigation avoidance process or otherwise. All right. This again, here's your January 2022 EEOC guidance. Look at this quote. Studies have shown that AI and algorithmic systems modeled on past practices can replicate biases and screen out diverse populations, right? As was the case with one artificial intelligence system that preferred male candidates over women based on past hiring practices, right? So if you think of AI as large models of data, well, sometimes the data that we have may have built-in biases, and do your best to make sure that your systems are not suffering from that and audit them. There we go. Okay. Next, the National Labor Relations Board. So now we're moving aside from the EEOC, right, which regulates discrimination in the workplace, to the National Labor Relations Board, which a lot of people think of strictly as unions, right? It does. It provides employees the right to organize collectively for their wages, hours, and working conditions. But it does apply even to non-unionized people who are agitating for better working conditions. The NLRB indicates that AI can act as improper or illegal surveillance. That is a National Labor Relations Act violation. It can be an unfair labor practice. So do make sure that your AI processes, if they are monitoring workplace communications or the like, does not violate the NLRB's, or the NLRA's rather, surveillance standards. Again, making sure, just putting human eyeballs and people who understand these rules in the process to make sure you're not inadvertently stepping on a landmine. Do know that I think when I'm done sort of listing all the concerns, you may be like, oh God, I want nothing to do with this. I think that's the bigger mistake, frankly, is letting this ship pass you by. All right. Quickly, I will talk about Texas and Colorado and then turn it back to Allyson. Again, Texas, Colorado, driving the employment law debate. What about California? What about Massachusetts? What about New York? What about Illinois? Well, maybe AI makes strange bedfellows or whatever it is, but Texas and Colorado are in the forefront of regulating AI in this context. Okay. January 2026, just 2 months ago, the Texas Responsible AI Governance Act was passed, and it defines AI broadly, right? and it creates disclosure requirements. You have to disclose to people that you're using AI. But wait, Texas, it doesn't apply to employers. Oh, well, okay, that may be helpful to you. And in Texas, there's no private right of action. Okay? So you can't, unlike in Massachusetts, for instance, where you can be sued privately for discrimination or wage and hour problems or just about anything, in Texas, this doesn't apply to employers, and private litigants can't bring a claim under this new law. The Texas Attorney General can. And I wouldn't imagine the Texas Attorney General will be particularly liberal in enforcing, anti-discrimination concepts. But nonetheless, it's out there, and they're kind of, along with Colorado, the first of the states out there. So I think other states that are thinking about regulating AI will be looking at Texas and trying to decide what happens here. This doesn't provide much of a yellow light, never mind a red light, to adopting or incorporating AI into your employment law HR processes. Colorado, on the other hand, may. Colorado, this just became effective 1 month and 3 days ago, and it talks about high risk AI systems. Okay. It is focused. Maybe if Texas is the red state AI regulation, Colorado would be the blue state regulation. Colorado is worried about foreseeable algorithmic, try to say that fast, discrimination, right? This is the idea that AI sort of mindlessly weeds out disabled candidates or older candidates, female candidates, et cetera, right? So in Colorado, you must have a reasonable risk management plan. You must give notice to people that you're using AI. You must give an adverse action notice. As best I can understand, that's a bit like your background check disclosure, right? Your candidacy was rejected because of your background check, but you have the opportunity to say, wait, that's not me. I never did time in prison. There must be a mistake. I think that's what a pre-adverse action notice is in this context. You're supposed to give notice on your website that you're using AI tools and notify the Colorado Attorney General if you discover algorithmic discrimination. Boy, that's a heck of an obligation, right? We were auditing our thing and we found that it was screening out candidates in a discriminatory fashion. We have to blow the whistle on ourselves. So this may be a bit of the what would you call it? The point of direction or where we're heading for the states that want to really regulate AI with an eye towards stamping out discrimination. Um, Hope that's helpful. I will be around for questions at the end, but at this point, I'll turn it back to Allison to do another poll and walk through best practices.
Great. So another poll question. How do you see the AI landscape evolving for human resources professionals over the next several years? So there's a list here. So I know Taryn just propped up the question. So go ahead and answer that. Here we go. Okay. Productivity is, I think, the top
Mhm.
and all of the above. I think that's a really important one because I think we're still uncertain. I think it's evolving all the time. So I think we have a lot to think about as we start talking about best practices. All right. So we're going to use this as kind of a Q&A type format to talk about best practices. So what are some of those best practices that you're going to use when you're reviewing your organization's use of AI? So what things are you going to think about? What considerations? So when you're talking about governance, we're talking about that overarching um, type of review where you're looking, although Mike just talked about all of those different things from a legal standpoint and considerations, you're going to look at your organization and determine what things we need to address to make sure that as an organization, we're addressing AI that will work for us. So you can create groups or committees that are pulling from those different parts of your business, whether it be legal, IT, HR, to establish how you want to implement AI for your organization. Do a risk assessment. What is it that you need to be able to use for tools, and how do we make sure that they're used properly? Training programs, because every employee within your organization might be using AI right now, and they might be using it differently. Cross-functional collaboration, making sure everyone is on the same page on how they're using it and what they should be using it for. And then ongoing monitoring. And that's going to be a theme throughout the best practices piece, is making sure that you are continuing to review and monitor your AI practices. So what are the different approaches to AI? If they can be all over the board. So you can be from one side of the spectrum, which is, nope, we're not going to use AI as an organization, which, Mike talked a lot about, that I think that you're going to get left behind if you take that approach. But then on the other end of the spectrum is anything goes. And that is concerning, I'm going to be honest. I think there needs to be parameters, and that's what we're going to talk about, the reason why you may want some parameters. Um, but again, what are things are you going to need to look at when you determine how you want to implement an AI policy? So, what are the risks? What are the parameters that you're going to allow employees to use that AI for? What tools? Is it going to be an open AI tool or a closed AI tool? Um, what kind of guardrails are you going to have in place? And is there different restrictions depending on that role that you're in? So this is the next big question. And why do you want an AI policy? Because if you ignore it, that's not the answer, because you need to be able to define it, to have a specific policy so that you can ensure that you are limiting your liability from a legal standpoint, all of those things that Mike just talked about. So first, what do you want to do? Define the scope of acceptable use. Um, what do you need to protect? Is there proprietary information? Is there confidential information? Address your growing trends in policies for your industry. Um, everyone has different requirements for their industry. If you're SOX 2, it's a much higher level of concern than if you're not. Help being careful using new and emerging technology. Which AI tools will you allow your staff to use or your organization to use? So those are all the things that you need to consider when you're starting to think about your AI policy.
Hey, can I talk about one of those, Allison?
Yeah, absolutely.
So here, and a lot of you are, because we're in Massachusetts, a lot of you are probably in very confidential, high-tech, biotech, et cetera, right? So Ogletree is too. When we take in confidential client information, that's sacrosanct. We
Mhm.
can't load that into a large model, right? So we have some closed AI tools to help us investigate a claim, create timelines, et cetera, but none of that is shared outside of our organization. And we as lawyers get training and warnings, frankly, all the time on this, right? Because we don't want one of our lawyers to load up our sensitive client data into ChatGPT, and God knows where it goes. So if you guys have the same, and we all do, whether it's data privacy obligations or the secret formula for Coca-Cola, this second one on the left, help protect confidential information. Make sure your people aren't unknowingly just releasing all of your confidential stuff out into the wild by using
Yeah.
an AI tool.
And it can be your client information, it can be HIPAA information, it can
Hmm.
be proprietary information. I was just recently talking to a client who one of their employees was loading in emails from clients, and those clients have specific requirements, security requirements on their side. And now you might be unknowingly actually um, going against what their security requirements are by using AI in that way. So it can be a really snowball very quickly. And so that's why those parameters are really important.
Mhm.
Thank you for
Mhm.
making that point,
Yeah.
Mike. Um, the other piece too is that I'll make another point about this with AI policies. I had a recent client who had a manager who was using AI for all of her emails. And then they were getting feedback from other employees as well as clients that it sounded robotic. It sounded robotic. So it can not only be the proprietary, the confidentiality piece, but it also can you can lose your identity as an organization if people are using AI because it is I'm sure some of you have noticed, there's a feel, there's a look to how AI responds and creates emails. So another consideration from that robotic standpoint. So what should be in your AI policy? You need to define what AI is. I think there was 67% that they're not using AI. We all use AI every day when we do a Google search. Has anyone noticed when you do a Google search, the first piece that comes up is just the summary. And you have to be careful not to take that summary as golden information because what was used to create that summary? As Mike said, garbage in, garbage out. So you need to make sure that there's found sources behind that. So define what AI is for your organization. How can people use and what does that mean for your organization? Um, can't say it enough that confidential information reminder, what can be entered into AI tools and what cannot. Identification of AI applications. Is it going to be a closed, open? No, if it's open, anything you put in there, anyone else can see. And then guidelines for AI application generally used. So, what are those guidelines? I like to break it down to what can employees use it for and what can they not. It's a list of what they can use it for and a list of what they can't. It's really basic in some ways. There's a lot of intro piece in the policy, but those are really key so that as an employee, I know, oh, I can use it for this. No, I can't use it for that. So it's really important to put some guardrails in if you haven't yet for AI policies within your organization. What other factors do you need to think about when you are talking about AI? Best practices. It should only be approved tech, making sure that people are using, if they're using AI, you know what they're using. And that can be part of that policy that, if an employee is using AI, they need to get permission from their manager or the IT person or whoever it happens to be. Um, needs to be an independent review of any output of AI. And if you jump down a couple of bullets, hallucinations, and this is why. AI is pulling information that doesn't know if it's true information or if it's garbage information. So you as an individual or your employees as individuals need to be reviewing any information that comes from AI. And I'm sure, Mike, you probably have examples of this
Mm.
that, I know there's been legal sightings that have been used in AI searches, and they're not actual true legal sightings. So,
Judges have flagged this. They've sent a legal brief from very accomplished law firms, thankfully not Ogletree. I'm not saying we're immune. Somebody used AI to create a brief, and the judge asked his or her clerk to review it, and the clerks are like, that case doesn't exist. It reads like a real case, and it's a total AI-based hallucination. And lawyers have lost their law licenses, firms have been sanctioned and have to alert their clients that they, committed a major foul, wildly embarrassing. So our general counsel sends us stern warnings about every 6 weeks, like, thou shalt not do this. But it does exist, and it looks good at first blush.
right. So our organization specifically, our policy is you can use AI to brush or, review grammatical errors or provide additional um, information, but it needs to be your own work initially. And I think that helps with those hallucinations, it helps with factual information. So just a tool of that we use, But again, that's why that policy is so important, so that you're putting in those requirements that you want for your organization. Stick with known tech is another key point. There's new iterations of AI coming out all the time. We don't know what they're pulling from, so just be thoughtful in which AI or tools you're using. Beware of bias, which we've talked about already and Mike talked about extensively, and audit your results. I can't say that enough. Don't just take what you're getting out and just assume it's correct. And that's that human oversight that's really important. Some takeaways. If you're not using AI, you will be soon, or your employees are, and you may not even be aware that they are. Um, it's going to continue to evolve. I think we're going to continue to see new legal considerations. We're going to see new policy considerations. It's going to be ever evolving. I think it's moving really fast. Um, Proactive governance is why it's so critical with this fast moving AI. Um, and it's possible to embrace this innovation while using it responsibly. And I think that, we'll go back to what Mike started with, is that if you're not using AI, you might be left behind. But again, you need to continue to monitor as an organization. And then I told Mike ahead of time I was setting this up for him. This one question. So, what's your biggest legal risk that you've seen from AI for organizations?
Well, this will drive the same point I said at the beginning, which is not doing it. I really do. One of our biggest clients, I won't mention the name, but very, very big. You've all heard of them. They put every one of their cases out to bid now. Even though we've done their work for 20 years, we have to bid each and every time to get the case. They were bought out, and it's this new approach. And one of the elements of the bid is how are you going to use AI and pass the savings to us, right? So, you better have an answer to that question. And thankfully we did. And we have our own internal programs that we've developed that summarize matters and streamline some of the things where money is spent so much in litigation, like discovery, document demands and interrogatories and the like. But we're also using some off-the-shelf tools. And so we have an answer to that question. And it does make us faster and more efficient. And we better be, right? But if we didn't have an answer to that question, there's your biggest risk. I don't think we would even be in the running for cases from this very big client. Um, I suppose you only get there if you have ensured that you aren't working a bias. I mean, that those are table stakes. Like it's got to be fair, it's got to be reliable. So maybe that's two answers, and that violates the spirit of the question if I only had to pick one.
Okay.
But uh, but that would be my one, like skipping it, just putting my head on like an ostrich, my head in the sand, and saying, "I can't. It's too scary. It's too complicated." That'd be my biggest risk. What's yours, Allison?
I think that's the key. I mean, so it's one of these things that we continue to see come up with our clients right now is, you know, they have some type of AI specific concern. And in the first question we ask is, do you have an AI policy? And they're like, no.
Mm,
And so I think it's one of those like, oh, we don't need to worry about it because we don't use AI. Um, but again, I think that it's burying your head in the sand is not the way to deal with it because I think unbeknownst to many of us, we have employees using it
mm.
everywhere, and people are using it just in personal lives, work lives. So we need to address it to be able to manage it effectively. It does look like we have some other questions. Let me see if I can pull them up. Q&A. Here we go. Will only the employer be responsible, or will the program create vendor be responsible for algorithm issues?
Hmm. That's a really good question. Certainly the employer would. If you're using a tool that has algorithmic discrimination, the employer is responsible for that discrimination. Um, it would not be a defense to say, "Oh, well, we used a tool that we relied on." Um, Whether the tool maker, the AI software company, could also be held responsible, perhaps, I guess. But it wouldn't exonerate you. But again, I those claims are rare, right? Even but long before I'd ever heard of AI, before any of us had heard of AI, I've been doing employment law for over 30 years. Um, I've had two disparate impact cases in my entire career, and I'm not alone. So, yes, it's important and do the right thing first and always, but don't let the risk of algorithmic discrimination paralyze you. Those are rare claims to begin with. And especially now with the EOC giving a green light to these and disavowing disparate impact claims, your risk is even less than it used to be.
So one of the other questions we had is, are we are concerned about AI in our workplace investigations, false text messages, phone logs. How do you navigate that?
You want me to do that one first? I want you
Yeah.
to. All right. Um, I have had, so a large part of my practice is workplace investigations. This is what I do mostly these days. And I just had one. We were talking about this in our prep for this session. I just had one where the guy filed one, two, three, or more claims per day, right? It was OSHA, the Department of Labor, the EEOC, and the NLRB. And some days we'd get a claim filed in three of those agencies, two of those agencies. And I mean, every day. And these claims, we quickly came to realize these claims were ChatGPT generated, right? And they were very similar, but not identical. So it was like, okay, well, what, it's like, fine, where's Waldo? What's different in today's DOL claim from yesterday's DOL claim? And it was very hard to manage this flood of info from this guy. We did. We used our own AI tools to create timelines and casts of characters and the like because we just couldn't keep up from a human standpoint with this, and it would have cost the client a fortune to have a bunch of lawyers teasing this stuff out. So we used the tools to grind through them, and there were vast commonalities between them. But here's what's really interesting to me, right? I was worried when this started to happen that we were about to get, EEOC requests for information. Just every time a claim got filed, well, here's your new charge number, here's your 14 element request for information, and, here's your investigator. And it was going to be like, oh my God, we heard nothing from the EEOC, the DOL, OSHA, nothing. I think they quickly realized that this was a chat GPT generated nothing burger. Now, I'm not sure you're going to get that lucky every time. And this guy probably way overplayed his hand by filing literally three, four, 5 dozen claims. Had he filed, three ChatGPT generated cases, would it have been different? Yeah, probably. It became obvious probably to everybody, even the agencies, what he was up to. But when I started to complain about this to the workplace investigation steering committee that I'm on, one person after the other was like, "Oh yeah, I'm seeing the same. Oh yeah, me too. Oh yeah, I get it." So get ready for that. And you can meet fire with fire. You can use an AI tool to scrub these things and get to the germ of the complaint without yourself being overwhelmed. I don't
Yeah.
know if that exactly answers the question, and you probably have your own experience, Allison. But,
Yeah, I think it's going to be a case by case situation. And I think that my guess is that we are going to continue to see that come up where there's, AI generated documents that really were not actual documents. But I think as we see that more, and it becomes more prevalent, then I think it can be teased out more,
mhm.
is my guess. But again, I think with any piece of any investigation, um, it's verifying. If it's a text message, let's make sure that the other side has the same text message, whoever it was
Yeah.
sent to or whatever it happens to be. So you're just going to have to do additional investigative work to make sure the things that are presented are truly true.
hmm Here's another one on the opposite side of the spectrum. I was doing a workplace investigation for a person who had an intellectual disability. This was the complainer. And they asked that we use a an AI related tool to provide a real-time transcript of the questions because answering my questions verbally, it was over Teams, but verbally in real time was too much for this person. So they wanted to have a streaming uh, transcript, if you will, of the questions. Now, I never used this particular tool before, and I was a little skeptical as to how good it would be. But boy, if this thing wasn't excellent, I mean, it wasn't a verbatim stenographer-based transcript, but it was nearly that accurate in real time, streaming these things on the screen. So there's a good example of somebody with a disability who spoke up and said, "Hey, this is what I need." And I said, "All right, I'm willing to try that tool with you." And we did, and it worked. So there's a lot of neat stuff out there, and I was impressed with the
So the
system.
only other question we got, which I think was answered, but it was, I'll just follow up to make sure, talking about AI policies in handbooks. So, again, as I mentioned, working with clients to create AI policies, and it's okay to push that out for, mid-year, to make sure that it's pushed out to employees. And then I would say when you do your annual review of your handbook, definitely put it in your handbook to make sure that it's in there as well.
Hmm.
But you can wait until the annual update to add it in there. So I think that's it for our questions. So let me head to the next slide. Which is a good big thank you. I want to thank everyone for attending. We're going to launch a survey right now before we give the Sherman HRC credits. Oh, one more question, Terrence said. Oh, I missed it. Hold on. Here we go. Let me pull it back up. Oh, when you're using AI with a regulatory firm, our IT and compliance person need to vet any AI platform before it's adopted here. One of the AI platforms we're using automatically invites the AI tool to meetings, so meetings can be recorded. I've declined this tool to join any meetings which are discussing employee-related issues. What are your guidance with respect to HR discussions? It's a great question. Should you be recording any HR type employee relations meetings if they're on a Zoom or Teams? So there's transcription.
You want to take that one first? I can, but you probably have as much to say as I do.
I'll let you go first.
Okay.
I'll follow up.
I decline them too. In fact,
Mhm.
when I'm doing investigatory interviews, I explicitly say I do not consent to be recorded, but I also assume that everyone ignores that and records me anyways and uses these tools to transcribe me. In litigation, we're regularly seeing requests for these kinds of AI-based summaries of things. Um, and in my experience, the transcripts, the recordings are pretty accurate, largely more accurate than I thought they would be. The summaries, on the other hand, kind of stink. It's like that doesn't pick up the gist of this at all. So I haven't been impressed with the AI-based summary tools that I've seen.
Yeah. We have used them for meeting notes, for just internal meeting notes, or if a client, but we do ask for permission every time. I
Hmm.
would not recommend them for an employee relations type conversations. But I think you make a great point, Mike, that assume that it's being recorded on the other side. So keep it very factual and to the point. But again, I wouldn't recommend because again, it could misconstrue something in those notes. And again, it's AI. There's can be hallucinations, there can be incorrect information. And it sends those notes out to anyone who's on that call. So I wouldn't recommend it.
Agreed.
That's my opinion. It's a good question, though. It's a really great
Yeah.
question.